got it.
Okay. So we're going to start with a quick question on a quick loop. So if you would get out your phones and log in here.
You never delete. That's a mistake.
Could you be convinced that the Earth is being taken over by aliens? And imagine that you're in the year 1938. All right. So we have 5 yeses, 4 no's, 6 maybes. So we're kind of spread out here. We'll see if that changes over the course of the presentation. So we're going to be presenting on The War of Worlds which is a radio drama by Orson Welles, and it's one of the most famous radio dramas because of the hysteria that it created. And so now Qingyi is going to be talking about its history and where it came from.
So this episode is like the 17th episode in a series of radio shows. The Mercury Theater on the Air, and this one was specifically featured on as you can see the date, October 30th, which was like a time around Halloween season. So like this episode is designated for like Halloween thing, and this radio program is adapted from H.G. Wells' novel The War of the Worlds, which I'm going to talk about next. Yeah, so this is a literary work that the radio show is based on. This novel is one of the earliest stories to illustrate conflict between the human being, like Earth-based human being, and the extraterritorial races. And it was published really early in 1897 by Pierce's Magazine and Cosmopolitan Magazine. This novel is set off on a first-person narrative of both an unnamed protagonist in Surrey and his younger brother in London. At this time, the Martians invading southern England. Unexpectedly, Robert H. Goddard, inspired by this book, invented the devices that allowed for Apollo Allen's moon landing.
You are now listening to the Mercury Theater on the Air, radio dramatization of The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. We know that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complaisance, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that are to our minds as our minds are to the beasts in the jungle, intellects vast, cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the Great Disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. And on this particular evening, October 30th, the Crossley service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios. Orson Welles' broadcast of the H.G. Wells novel was modeled after a regular evening broadcast, as it incorporated elements such as a weather report and live music from a local hotel ballroom. The house band was well known for their Stardust, their song named Stardust, which was one of the songs featured in the broadcast. The main distinction of the broadcast from others is the actual news that was being reported.
So there were a lot of announcements that were interrupting the live music, and about 3 minutes in, that's when we see the first announcement, and it was talking about the different explosions that are going off on Mars, and we're now going to listen to that first announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
All right, so after that, it goes to an interview with Professor Pearson, and based in Princeton, and it was, he was basically saying that the whole thing was just fake. It didn't really need, well, there were explosions going off on Mars, but it didn't really have anything to do with the Martians or any intelligent life at all. Like there was no intelligent life on Mars. And later, about 13 minutes in, we are met with a meteor that strikes in Grover's Mill, New Jersey. And at first it's believed to be a meteor, but when the reporter, Carl Phillips, goes in about 13 minutes into at Grover's Field, he thinks that it's something else. And we're going to listen to that now.
Something I haven't mentioned in all this excitement, but it's becoming more distinct. Perhaps you caught it already on your radio. Listen, please. Do you hear it? A curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. I'll move the microphone nearer. Here. Now, we're not more than 25 feet away. Can you hear it now? Professor Pearson?
Yes?
Can you tell us the meaning of that scraping noise inside the thing?
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I say, do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
Metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial. Not found on this Earth. Friction with the Earth's atmosphere usually tears holes in a meteorite. This thing is smooth and feels cylindrical.
Something's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. This end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw, and this thing must be hollow.
Alright, so it was a little hard to hear in that, but like it's, Pearson was saying that now it's not just an extraterrestrial, it is an extraterrestrial object, and but it's like, it's not a meteor at all, because it has a smooth surface, it looks more like a capsule. And about 3 minutes later, Phillips is saying that he sees a monster coming out, and that is shown here.
There's something happening. Some shape is rising out of the pit. It can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror and leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Oh, they're turning into flames. The field caught by the woods of cars, the gas tanks, the automobile, spreading everywhere. Coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Yeah, and then it cuts to silence before the announcer then comes back in, the narrator comes in. And so after that, the monster comes out, Pearson is then called upon again to like give what he thinks about it, and he says that heat ray, the Martian technology of heat rays is going to be used to destroy basically the people at Grover's Field. And the militia is called out, and and they issue a state of martial law on the area, so no one's able to come in. The city's evacuated. But the militia says that everything's under control, like we've got this, all of the cause for concern is unfounded. But they were wrong, and the city was later taken, and the humans were defeated by the 6 machines, heat rays. And so after that, it cuts to 2 different battles in the Watchung Mountains and Langham Field, which is in Watchung Mountains is in northern New Jersey. So they're kind of moving up. And so then one of the heat rays is destroyed by an airplane bomber, but then the other 5 move to New York, where the main Martian attack happens. And that is going to be our final clip from the broadcast.
This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running toward the East River, thousands of them, dropping in like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue. 5th Avenue. 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
Yeah, so Carus Phillips died, and this was kind of the climax of the whole thing. And Chingy is going to talk more about the Pearson monologue that followed it.
So we just said that in the very beginning of this video, the audio clip, Pearson, like the professor of Princeton University, kind of talk about the impossibility of like the Martians invasion. But like right now, he's like basically narrating his personal experience of like seeing the whole scene. But just like before his model actually started, there's a brief intermission where the title of the program is restated, and the host kind of remind the audience that this show is fictitious. But then, so the Pearson monologue start with Pearson illustrating the rumbling scene. The rumbling scene is basically all the buildings are crumbling down upon the landing of the UFO. And Pearson was like real afraid that he is like the only human being left alone on the planet. And then once he set out a little bit, he just walk out his home, and he see a single bird alive, and he meet a militiaman amid the rubble. He was kind of relieved because he saw another human being. So then what happened is the militiaman expressed to him a fascist idea that they should like take over Mars by using Martian technology to manipulate Martians, so that the militiaman and the Pearson could govern Martian worlds. It was a bold idea, but Pearson wasn't in favor of that. But eventually, Martian died due to lack of immunity to Earth's germs, which is a promising idea, which is a promising news. And then, like a couple of years later, Pearson sit in his prison office in the university and just like look at the students and like the crowds shuffling back and forth outside his windows. And he was like relieved that the whole thing's over.
The public had a very extreme reaction to the broadcast. It started a panic. People who actually believed the Earth was in danger would deal with the invasion in their own ways, such as one woman who reportedly attempted suicide with poison to escape the aliens. Another man tried to volunteer himself to fight the enemy. One woman ran into a church proclaiming, New York destroyed, it's just the end of the world," You might as well go home to die. I just heard it on the radio. Scores of people rushed to the telephones to call their family or the electric company to turn the power off so that they would be safe from the Martians. Some would actually leave town. Keep in mind, though, this took place when your grandparents were young, or not even born, and although alien invasions are commonly found in science fiction stories and film today, many Americans were not familiar with the concept at all. H.G. Wells was considered a visionary after his novel was published, but still not everyone would be familiar with the story. Some may have only had read an article in the news about the possibility or lack thereof for making contact with extraterrestrial life. Perhaps just enough to put the idea in their heads. But keep in mind that it took over 50 years after the book was written for Marvin the Martian to be created, and 10 years after the broadcast. The broadcast was made after with the intention of spooking its audience to keep up with the Halloween spirit, not necessarily causing mass hysteria and panic. There were a few indications that the broadcast was a drama and not reality, including one at the beginning, intermission, and end. Someone switching from station to station could miss the warning signs at the beginning, leading them to believe that the beginning of the broadcast was serious before the Martians came into the picture. As they go in to the broadcast with that mindset, who's to say which moment would actually convince them that what is happening is actually impossible?
And the press also had a field day with this because after the airing of the show, there were a lot of reporters coming up to the producer and Orson Welles asking, like, have you heard about these traffic deaths and the stampedes? And there's like a whole panic that's happening because of your broadcast. And so obviously Orson Welles and John Houseman, they didn't really see this, they didn't foresee this happening, and so they were kind of taken aback by it. But the public accepted accepted it after it was stated that they realized that it was fake. However, the press kept on covering it for at least the following week. There were a lot of articles in New York Times, Herald Examiner, Daily News, and they were all saying that there should be more restrictions on like how many how podcasts are radio broadcasts are vetted. As one senator even proposed a bill that censored this type of radio broadcast that might steer the public in the wrong direction. The bill didn't get passed, but it was a sentiment that was shared among a lot of the press and public. So before we get to our discussion, we're going to take that Kahoot again. So like after hearing the clips and the history behind it, what would you think now? Would you be convinced that this is real? So we've kind of shifted more to the maybe side a little more. So yeah, it's still a little bit like questionable whether someone would be, whether you would. So people who said yes, why do you think yes? Why would you be convinced by this? So what made the broadcast effective in like winning people over to this idea? Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've heard about this broadcast before, one of the things I heard is that they broadcast it like overlapping with a very well-known broadcast, like a very well-known like regular show. And so people would normally, tune in, like he intentionally did this so that people would tune in after that show ended, like 20 minutes into the War of the Worlds broadcast. And that would be after the initial announcement that, oh, this is the drama. And this is based on work of fiction. People have said that this sounds like real news. And then at the end, one of the people in the studio, I don't remember who it was, apparently like very accurately mimicked the voice of the president at the time, like Roosevelt. Which I think that would have been pretty convincing to me if someone could mimic Roosevelt.
There was an announcement made that after it was like about 20 minutes between right after the militia was being like put out into Trenton, the president, or it wasn't really the president, it was like the secretary of something about state, secretary of state or something. Yeah, I think that they were responsible for that announcement. So that's a good point. Was there anything else that made the broadcast effective? Okay, so some people that said no. So what would have made it more believable for you? So, how would it have been made more clear? Was it the way that it was?
Like if you are the producer, if you want to trick people, what kind of things you want to add, or like what kind of like part of the radio show you want to change, make it more like convincing.
Well, it might have been better on actual radio, but like the recording you played in class was just difficult to understand.
Okay.
It was so old, I think.
All right. Sounds good. And then the silence and the cutoffs especially after Carl Phillips died and after the Martians were viewed at the middle. So how did that affect the way that you felt and the way that you viewed the broadcast?
One of the cutoffs in the broadcast was actually, the implication was that the speaker had just died.
I'll answer. Since you guys are slow, you're gonna go for it. I was gonna say this is only a year after the Hindenburg, so I think do we have a presentation on the Hindenburg in this class?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So again, it's like hearing something like this live on the air was still a really new thing. I think radio at the time was more, like you said, these kind of programs. It was the idea of kind of broadcasting live, especially something kind of traumatic, was still relatively new. So I think that, and people often look back to this broadcast in the Hindenburg, it's kind of like these turning points in terms of putting something live and kind of traumatic or emergency or situation happening live on here. So I think that really affected people, and they weren't used to hearing something this dramatic and kind of visceral play out in real time.
I think it really added to the eeriness of the broadcast, and it made it really effective and sound believable. Cause it's like in those movies when everything goes silent and it's it's over. You don't know if it's in a good way or a bad way, and it kind of makes it seem like a lot more believable.
Yeah. So from that discussion, we're going to have a little activity. So we're going to split in 3 groups. So 1, 2, 3, 5. So groups of 5. And then so it's basically how would you go about convincing the public that something completely fictional is actually happening? And this can be through a monologue or a song or a broadcast. And would there be anything from Wallace's ideas that you would use? And if so, what are they? So these 5 Harsha, and then and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So ending a pile, these 5, and then you 5.
A Halloween prank
Yeah.
on your siblings.
That and just people can cross-check it too quick.
Yeah. I don't think this is I guess that's fair.
I think you'd have to get multiple news sources to get with you.
multiple channels.
Yeah.
So like
multiple channels on
different,
TV.
Like, you know, you gotta get ABC, Fox, and all those together.
If you get Twitter to support you, could be helpful. We get some social media in there.
Yeah, the presidential election.
Yeah, like the riots. That came up a little bit ago and everybody's very freaking out.
Yeah, just do something like posting a picture of maybe something like it's like
Yeah, but I think you could do it like relatively easily as long as you'd have to do it in a remote location where no one can like take a video and be like, oh, it's fine. Like you'd have to do it somewhere that like people wouldn't like know. So.
Yeah. I mean, especially after the Hawaii one.
Or like, let's say like something happened, like they noticed some weird weather patterns near Bermuda or something.
Yeah.
They sent like a plane over, and then they had live broadcasts from the plane.
Yeah, you could do that.
Or anything could happen there. Like anything. Because nobody can actually go. Actually, no, I take that back. Don't they have like trips there?
But they catch on. I feel like it would have to be like.
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, it has to be something that matters to people because we could just like start this and no one would care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that was really important in that broadcast was the space and timing.
Yeah.
So now present your ideas or like to the class. So we're going to start with this group and we'll go to the left.
I mean, he said that one way that you could do it was with Donald Trump's presidential alerts. And just, I mean, presidential alerts, like, after Donald Trump, like, tweets something very angry at, like, Syria or something, we could, like, make, like, a presidential alert. Or we would just need some sort of other, like, reputable source, like, some sort of, like, government, source to do this, or at least make it look like it was done by the government, because people are like, with the internet, and since we're all used to like mass communication now, we need some sort of, like, you can't just do it on any radio station or TV show. You need to have something that people would believe is credible. That is like built up as credibility.
Yeah, like NPR too.
Yeah,
people would believe NPR. If you came on with like sirens and it's like presidential alert, and then one of his tweets against a foreign country, I think that could get people scared.
So if it was like an electronic broadcast, like a radio broadcast or something like The Purge with the like alarm and the monotone voice and like the robotic voice that the speaker has, would make it a lot more believable.
There were like alarms in the walls too, like when the Martian who started coming out of the capsule. So yeah, that's cool. All right, second group.
We had a couple ideas. One of our ideas would be we need to broadcast something that couldn't be like immediately shut down. For example, if you say, "Oh, there's a humongous giant in Times Square," there's people there with cameras, and it's automatically get like kind of like what is it called? Busted.
Yeah.
But if you say something else that's happening like in somewhere that's like less travelable, I guess. Like, let's say something like the National Association of Weather detected some weird weather patterns near the Bermuda Triangle. I don't think anyone's going to be able to get there to disprove something, and during that time maybe you can make something up, because anything can happen there. So just like kind of making stories around places that are hard to get to, and so that the like video, the ability to videotape things nowadays can't just disprove all these broadcasts, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point because even like the first announcement that happened, it was just talking about explosions going off in Mars, which is actually pretty believable. Even like if today you were told that okay, there are like explosions going off in Mars, like would there be any way to like for people to immediately be like, no, that's not happening? Like if really reputable sources are saying so, you know. So that's a good thought there. And so then third group.
Sort of going off like what Richie said, if you put, like, I guess in the context of the time, because nowadays everybody listens to radio, but if you put like whatever disaster in a place that's more like desolate and also something that is not quite as unbelievable as like aliens, and then also the pauses that they put in the broadcast are like effective for drama, but if you want people to believe it, it's better to like have the narrator be someone that's not dead, so that when they pause, there's like if someone dies when they're broadcasting, someone else isn't gonna just pick up the broadcast where they left off. So I feel like that would make it more believable.
Yeah. Well, there were two separate people. I don't know, like the Carson, Carl Phillips was like the field reporter person, and then he died, and then it went back to the studio where there was another narrator who was saying it. But yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it.